Hey, everybody. Merry Christmas. Thanks for tuning in today on this very special day. I have a wonderful episode coming up for you guys. I did an interview with a friend of the pod, Lilly Rachels. She is a relational communication coach, and her professional journey began in the gym, actually, as a personal trainer and trauma-sensitive yoga instructor. It was during this time that she noticed how openly her clients shared intimate details of their lives, which sparked a desire to pursue a career in psychotherapy. After earning a master's in social work, she began work as a therapist. However, Lilly soon realized the limitations of traditional talk therapy and felt compelled to explore alternative paths. With the desire to offer a more holistic experience, she transitioned into coaching. Lilly's coaching practice is centered around helping clients create strong relationships through teaching effective relational communication and how to navigate conflict with composure. Enjoy! All right, well, thanks again for joining me. I'm so excited for today's topic. How did you meet Casey, by the way?
So I met Casey through my friend Will. He was coming over. We're doing a fire at the house one night, and he's like, "I'm going to bring my friend Casey." And he's like, he described her. He's like, "She's a super cool hippie chick, Lily. I think you'll like each other." I was like, "Okay, bring your friend." And we did. Like, we hit it off, and I was like, "You're awesome." So just through a friend.
Yeah, she entered into her hippie chick phase like kind of recently. Which I think is really cute. Like, she's just evolving and I love it. But
I love that.
yeah. All right. So just to kick things off, I just want to ask, what led you to where you are today with your work, your life, your successes, all in all, everything?
You know, it's funny because when I look back, I'm like, I feel like I've done so many kind of random things, but they do all kind of connect. So originally, when I was, high school student going to college, I thought I wanted to be a nurse because everyone told me that was a good job and that's what I should do. And then I was in a really bad car accident and I spent a few days in the hospital.
Oh.
And I learned from that I did not want to be a nurse, that I did not want to work in a hospital. And I got really into fitness because when I was hurt in the car accident, I fractured my spine in several places, broke my shoulder, and I couldn't do anything for about 7 weeks. So I found working out and I loved it. So I changed my major to, I think it was exercise science and wellness, and became a personal trainer.
Everybody did that.
Exactly. Well, it seemed like it would be fun. But I got into personal training, and what I realized, it wasn't so much the personal training part that I enjoyed. What I enjoyed was the conversation I started having with clients.
Oh.
Yeah. And how open people are when they have, their endorphins are flowing and they're just sharing intimate details of their life with you. And then I found yoga, and I went into teacher training there and then on to trauma-sensitive yoga certification. And I was like, this mind-body connection thing, it was the first time I'd ever heard of it. So I was really excited about that. And I was like, I want to help people, even deeper with like their relationships and their mental health. So that's when I went back to school and got my master's to do psychotherapy.
Wow. Psychotherapy.
Big word. But it didn't stop there. I realized I didn't enjoy the traditional therapy world very much.
Yeah.
And I wanted a more holistic approach. And that's what pushed me towards coaching.
Okay, so you just more general like life coaching with that added benefit of your psychotherapy background. Was that kind of where you take that from?
It is. And really focusing on relationships has been kind of the more niche that I've focused into.
Yeah. Sorry, excuse me. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I can't tell if I'm like paused or not. Yeah, so how come relationships, like what got you into that niche?
I truly believe that, excuse me, now we're both coughing.
Yeah.
That, Esther Perel says, like, the quality of your life is determined by the quality of your relationships.
I love Esther Perel.
I do too.
All day I could listen to her. Yeah.
And it's just something I've always been really passionate about. Sorry, I had to pause it so I could cough. Like we're both like coughing at the same time.
That's okay.
It's okay. We're going to get this together.
Yeah.
And I think it just determines everything in life. Like we are pack animals. And if you don't have people, there's not much left. Like if you don't have, those supportive relationships, whether they're romantic or platonic, like I get a lot out of just like my relationships with my girlfriends. But if you don't have that, life is really lonely and isolated.
That's so true. Did you, because I know when we were talking before this, that you felt that your childhood and your background kind of really shaped this passion of yours. Is that correct?
It did for sure. So I grew up in a house where my parents, they were married until my mom passed away a few years ago. So my parents stayed married, but they were not, in my opinion, happily married. And watching how they would fight when I was younger, I would kind of step in and try to play therapist and go listen to what my mom had to say and then what my dad had to say and then try to get them to come to, it's not very dysfunctional, not a good thing to do, but try to get them to come together and just talk it out. Because I was like, why can't you just figure this out? And it wasn't until years later, after I'd gone through my own divorce, I realized that it wasn't just this matter of like the issue that I saw that they were fighting about. It was all the stuff my mom had experienced before in her life, all the stuff my dad had experienced. And those wounds were just like rubbing on each other, creating so much more conflict.
Oh man, I bet that is such, obviously you said it's a dysfunctional thing, and try not to let your kids do that if you're listening.
Yeah, don't dump on your kids.
Yeah. So how, I'm sure that basically playing therapist to your parents as a kid came with its own negative and positive consequences in your adulthood, maybe. Can you tell us like the impact that that had on you and how it maybe seemed to have turned into one of your superpowers?
Let's start with the negative. I would say the negative was before I became aware of it, right? So the negative was I got really conflict avoidant and I would withdraw when things got intense and I wasn't good at asking for my needs to be met by others because I would just like try to figure it out on my own. So that was the negative. But after, going to therapy myself and doing, leaning into growth work for myself, it became a positive because I realized I got really good at looking at things from a broader perspective. And my friends call me for that. That's how I kind of realized, I guess you'd say it is a superpower. It's like, What do people go to you? Like your friends, your family, whoever, like, what do they come to you for and ask for help? And for me, it was, here's the situation. Like, what do you think? And I was really good at being like, well, I could see how they might be coming from this perspective, but there's also this perspective. So I think that's where the ability to listen and take in what people are saying, like that kind of over time developed into a gift, even if I shouldn't have been using it when I was little.
I mean, you gotta find the silver lining. Lemons into lemonade, right?
Oh, always, always. If you look for the good, you'll find it.
Absolutely. I am naturally an optimistic person, so I love that. It's so true though.
I love that. I say the same thing. I'm like, I have the optimism bone that like, I just believe that things are going to get better.
Yeah, and it will.
Sometimes it gets a little messy first.
Yeah, you just got to walk through. That's what I tell people. You just got to walk through the mud a little bit. It's hard at first. You just got to get over that little hump. That's so funny. Are you an Enneagram 9?
I'm not, but
you're not.
I'm not. Oh. So, okay, I thought I was for a long time.
I mean, all the signs are there.
Exactly, because I was like, a peacemaker. And I did a few years ago, or I guess it was during COVID, I did a book club because we all started book clubs via Zoom with our friends, right?
Yeah.
And we read the book, The Honest Enneagram. And a friend of mine was like, Lily, you're not a 9. And she's like, why do you think you're a 9? I was like, because I like to keep the peace. And she's like, I don't think you're a 9. And then fast forward a year later, I went to, I had some stuff going on in my life and I went to talk to a therapist who used the Enneagram. And within the first few minutes, she's like, you're a 7. And
I was just going to say.
Really? And I went and I read about it and I was like, oh, I am a 7. The problem is up until earlier in my life, what I was basing things on in my behaviors, I was in the low health of the 7.
Yeah. Well, because I'm pretty sure that's correct. When the 7 is in the disintegration stage, they go to the 9 traits, right?
Yeah, and 2.
And 2.
I think they go to 1 is like the line they go to, but they can look like a sick 2. And that was
Okay.
me in my early 20s. I was a sick 2 in my early 20s.
Some of those I say I know all this stuff about the Enneagram, and I do know a lot, but it is hard to remember which number goes to which for who. It's like,
I'm glad you brought that up, though, because I love the Enneagram, and it's something I tend to bring up with friends or whoever will listen, because I use it with clients because it's so good for relationships, because it's like, look, this is how you see the world and naturally might show up, and your partner might be completely different. Like, my boyfriend's an 8, and
that's
if
me.
I didn't, I love 8s, but if I didn't understand certain things about 8s, like, I'd have my feelings hurt a lot.
Oh yeah. That is so funny.
You might appreciate this. You're an 8. You're not going to get offended, but I have a friend who's also dating an Enneagram 8. And I was like, maybe I'll start a support group for who date Enneagram 8s. And she's like, yeah, because they can be intense sometimes. I'm like, yeah. But in a good way.
Yeah. My dad, I'm positive, was an average, maybe lower average 8. And it's a lot growing up. He didn't mind having a heated conversation in front of anybody. It's like so stressful.
Well, and in realizing too, because I watched my boyfriend do it, and I'm like, he's not affected. Like, I'm over here like, is everyone going to be okay? And he's fine. Like, what's the matter? Yeah. We're just talking. And I'm like, that doesn't seem like talking to me. But again, it's not good or bad. It's just like, we do things a little bit differently sometimes.
For sure. And me and Casey's an 8 as well. And sometimes we communicate so horribly, but then when we're in groups of people, like we'll do our team retreats, and we're just like, we're like this, right? But in like our fun, bantery way, because that's what it can turn toxic, but that's how an 8 can be intimate with somebody, is when you go toe to toe with people, and no one can understand that but an 8. And so there's some of the other girls in that group were just so uncomfortable when we would start talking. They're like, you guys need to make up. And I'm like, what are you talking about? We're doing just fine.
You're like, this is how we show that we love each other, because we're comfortable being our complete selves with one another.
Exactly.
So, and not to just talk about the 8s, but I think you guys can also be like the most genuine, kind people, because you go to 2 in growth, and it's like the best side. So again, I have a heart for 8s.
Yeah, me too. I have a heart for, I remember, I've said this 100 times on this podcast, but I remember when I discovered the Enneagram, I had a big community of friends at the time. Like, we all did like a big wine night every Monday night, and there was like 40 of us that would go. And when I discovered it, I realized that all the people I naturally gravitated toward, like, you just kind of break off into your little groups or hang out separately outside of that Monday night, they were almost always all 2s. I was like, I'll take a bullet for you guys. And so it was so surprising, like, because that's my health. I see myself in them in a healthy way. Like, the whole thing, it was very eye-opening.
That's a really cool point, because I have a girlfriend who's a 5, and that's where 7 goes in growth. And when I'm with her, I'm like, I love your energy, because she's incredibly smart, and she's so grounded. And it's maybe, again, it's that like, that's what I'm looking for, because that's my health state.
Yeah. I love it so much. I could talk about this all day long. Do you listen to
solely about the Enneagram?
I mean, yeah. Do you listen to The Art of Growth? That's a podcast.
I don't, but I will.
You should listen to that. It's what really taught me so much about the Enneagram. So what they do are these panels of every type. So they'll take a panel of type 2 men and women, and they'll talk about a certain topic like vulnerability or whatever, and they'll just talk about that experience for them. And a guy who is obviously the host is mediating it and just like directing it. It's really cool. It was one of the most eye-opening things that I learned when I was learning about me being an 8, because I could go on, but like me being an 8 as a kid, a woman in the church growing up was just, I never felt comfortable. I never felt in place. And I always had to be, because the church like values the type 2 type of woman, right?
Oh, absolutely.
The servant. I'm like,
I think
fuck that.
Well, I think so many women mistype themselves, especially like
Yes.
I'm from the South, in the South, because again, yeah, it's like that's the kind of archetype that you're supposed to fit into.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like the most, if you read about it, you're like the helper. It just feels like like, oh, this is the best person. Like they're so kind, they're so loving. Because I remember getting to like the core desire of the 7. It's like, I just want to be happy. And I was like, wow, I sound shallow.
That's so funny. Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, I think that's a great tactic to use in like your work. You did mention, to get back on track, you did mention before that you wanted to share your 7 keys to healthy communication, which, because communication is probably one of the most difficult things to master, if at all you could do that, because humans are so diverse and dynamic, and you're always meeting new ones, right? You're getting into relationship with new ones all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious as to what these are.
Yeah, so these might sound a little bit different than like your typical communication hacks, which are normally like, make eye contact and check your tone, which all that stuff is really important, right? Like that's really important. But these are things that I find really help when you're working through conflict and you're having to have like uncomfortable and difficult conversations with maybe your partner or maybe a business partner or even a friend. And so the first key is clarity. And I hammer this one home with my clients because a lot of the time, especially in a relationship, you'll start fighting and maybe you realize later on, like you weren't even fighting about the same thing.
Yeah.
It's like, I was upset about this, you're upset about that. And we're both kind of going at it. But if we really took a second to break it down and find some clarity, it's like, do you really know what the problem is? And it's easy to, I think, when we don't really explore what the problem is on our own before we go to our partner to, maybe I'm upset because you didn't unload the dishwasher. But if I dug a little deeper, maybe I don't feel supported or like you care about me. And the dishes were just the thing that, happened in the moment that I'm upset about, but it was a much deeper issue. So the first key is really just finding clarity and understanding like, what is the problem? What is the thing you need to talk about? What is the thing that's bothering you?
Right. Yeah. I think that's really important. I used to do that a lot because as an 8, a lot is building up in me that I just absolutely want to explode. So what I used to do, and I felt ridiculous doing it, but I still did it regardless because it was the only way for me to clearly and precisely get across my point, was I would write it down. And I'd hand it to them, like, please read this. And it could be 2 pages long, but like, please read this. I can't say it out loud. So yeah, I like that.
And that can be really helpful writing it down, especially if you struggle with like containing your emotions and like regulating your emotions. If you know, like, I'm going to burst into tears if I try to talk to them and won't be able to get through it, or I'm going to get really angry and start yelling at them, writing it down is a great idea.
Yeah.
And then I guess I can keep moving through these.
Yeah.
The second key is it's honesty. So once you're clear on the problem and you go to share it with, we'll just stay in the relationship game, like with your partner, it's being honest and just sharing the facts. So this is where I encourage people, like, don't embellish the story. Don't try to add any drama into it. Like, this is what happened. Like, when I saw you, get a text message from whoever, like, that's what bothered me. Don't, like, you're not sharing the story yet. Like, we get to the part where you get to be messy, but the first part is just being honest. Like, this is the truth of what happened. This is the facts of what happened. Because again, sometimes we mix together. And when I work with clients, we talk about the difference between sharing the honest story versus the honest facts versus the story. Because the story is the mess I made up in my head. it's all the things I've been thinking about all day long about this thing that bothered me. But if I just go into it and share my story as if it is truth and fact, then my partner's just going to start disagreeing with me and it's going to be a bigger mess.
Right. Yeah.
And then moving on from honesty is vulnerability. And this is where I get a lot of pushback from my male clients typically.
That's where we stop.
Yeah, exactly. Because people view vulnerability as, I think, even with all Brene Brown's work on it, I think people still view it as weakness a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I mean,
Those
you
books
might,
changed my life. Oh my God.
well, being an eight, especially like going into vulnerability, that's hard.
It took me quite some time. And at the time when I was really going through it, I did have a great partner who held a lot of space for me, and he really just let me be. And that was really great. So when I read her book, Daring Greatly, like 10 times, every other page I'm in tears, and it was very difficult, but it just felt better every time I would have that courage to like say, like, in the heat of the moment, say what I really wanted to say. Obviously not with throwing fists or anything, but sorry, see my kitty. Let's just put him here.
Aww.
Yeah, whenever those moments when I was like, okay, I would just pause, because that's a big thing for eights. It's just like, let your anger pass for a second, because that's all it's going to take. It's just, I mean, it should anyway.
Yeah.
Just let your anger pass and then be like, okay, what's really behind this? Am I offended, or did he hurt my feelings, or what was it? And then voice that, even if it took me 5 minutes to say my next thing. And then I'd say that regardless of that's the thing with vulnerability, right? Regardless of their response. And every time I would do it, I just was like, this feels so good. It just lighter and lighter, and it just got easier and easier. And like, the grass is greener on the other side.
It definitely is. And like, you hit the nail on the head with that, where it's like, especially if anger comes up for people, it's like, what's underneath the anger? And sometimes I'll give people the activity of like, ask yourself why. Like, I feel this way. Well, why? And then get the answer to that question and ask yourself why again. And do this like 12 times until you get down to the nitty gritty, because almost always something lives underneath anger, whether
Absolutely.
It's like insecurity, jealousy, whatever it is. It's like, there's something deeper there that we're not sharing right away. Because when I think of vulnerability, I think of like, I have dogs, and when they roll over for like a belly rub, like, to me, that's like vulnerable, right? Because it's like you're showing your soft belly. And I remember when I first kind of started diving into vulnerability for myself, I remember telling someone, I'm like, I'm afraid if I talk about how I really feel, it's like rolling over on my back and they're going to stab me in the stomach. I was like, that was that fear of like, if I'm vulnerable, what are you going to do with this?
Yeah, you got to let it go.
Exactly. And that's where the courage comes in. And that's why I'm like, no, it's strong people that are vulnerable, because you can't be vulnerable if you're weak.
I do love Esther Perel, like I mentioned. Did you listen to her podcast too?
I do.
Okay, well, she doesn't produce as many episodes as I'd like, but there was one episode, I don't remember the couple that was on, or what the issue was between the couple, but she had them, they were getting a little heated, and I think they were talking about how their arguments just go haywire, get too out of hand or whatnot. So she had them stand up and just physically lay on the floor. And she talked about how that just that act just instantly diffuses and brings everybody down, and just talk. If you're going to have this argument, do it laying down, because it's a vulnerable position. And I heard that, I was like, that is just genius. I was hooked.
No, that's an awesome suggestion. And even I talk to people about like, if you're not in a place where you're going to lay down, it's like keeping your body open and receptive versus like folding your arms and leaning back. It's like, because that just feels closed off. So I'll even take my hands and turn just like my palms up and like keep them in my lap, just to like signal to my body that like I am receptive, even though like maybe I want to get up and run away. That flight response is coming in. I'm like, I'm staying here, I'm listening, and I'm receptive.
Just thinking about that, like physically doing something different with your body, like thinking about it, I'm like, oh, because it's so true. It's just so powerful when you change your physical self during those intense emotions, those moments, it is so oddly effective. It blows my mind.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. And then the next key is my favorite thing to talk about, and that's energy. And this is where I get a little woo on people, but everything is energy, and emotions carry energy, and words carry emotion. And this is why if you're in a relationship and you are really upset and you tell your partner that you're fine, they know you're not fine, right? They can feel
Yeah.
that you're not fine. It doesn't matter if you said, I'm perfect. Like, if you're not, they're going to feel what you really are. They're going to feel that energy. And so what I work with people on is like really taking responsibility for the energy that you're bringing to the conversation. Because if you're going to come into a conversation like high on anger, it's probably not going to go very well. But if you take the time, like you said, to dig deeper and be like, okay, what's under the anger? And you're like, oh, I actually am really offended. And then you go from there, and maybe you even try to climb up, the vibrational ladder a little bit higher, be like, how could I, get out of being offended? What's kind of the next level up from that? And maybe it's that, I was really disappointed in what you said. And going to someone from a place of, this really disappointed me versus I'm pissed off at you is going to be received much better, because I believe when you break it down, we really only have fear and love in life. There's fear and there's love. And
Yeah.
everything we do and say is coming from one of those places, somewhere on the continuum, right? And so when we can get to a place where we're really taking responsibility for the emotion that we bring into the conversation, that energy we bring into the conversation, they tend to go better. Because again, you're not coming at your partner with like, oh, I'm so frustrated, I'm so bitter. You're going a little bit higher than that. Like, okay, how could I, or how could I get myself to a better state before we dive into this?
Yeah, and I think that was it's so important. And that is one of the things I learned pretty young, unfortunately, because of my father. My parents were excellent. I would not trade my childhood for anything, and they never fought in front of us. I would see my dad debate with my mom back and forth or whatever, but it was never like an argument or like run and hide argument. But if he was, if we were the subject of his wrath, it was like, I don't ever want to make anybody feel this way, how I'm feeling right now. Um, and so that was one of the first like lessons that I learned. And like, okay, don't act like this being in front of me because it's getting nowhere. All I want to do is one, fight back. I couldn't because I was a kid,
Mm-hmm.
or just like go run and hide, right? So that was very important lesson, I guess, growing up. But yeah, I do agree with all that.
Yeah, because when someone, comes at you with that kind of really rough, intense energy and that anger, your nervous system's going into that. Like you said, you went, fight or flight, and your body's like, I'm too small to fight, so I'm going to go into flight right now and try to, get out of this situation or do what I can to keep myself safe. And that's why I'm like, your emotions they're always valid, right? And they're very real for the person feeling them, but they're also your responsibility. They're not
Absolutely.
someone else's responsibility. So when we take ownership of those, and then we're like, okay, like, he didn't make me angry. This happened, and I chose to be angry about this. Like, and I can also choose to be something else about it. And then
Right.
the next key from there is grace. And this isn't just for your partner, but also for yourself, because we say
Big
the wrong
time.
thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know about you, but I have definitely said things in the heat of the moment that I'm like, that wasn't fair. That wasn't good. That was not, I wish I'd acted different. And, the old me would beat myself up about it. Now I'm a little quicker to be like, that was my bad. I'm going to apologize for what I did, and then I'm going to let it go. But it's also giving your partner some grace too, and remembering that they're human. And if you're in a relationship that's healthy and you truly believe that they're a good-willed person, then it's a lot easier to leave space for them, to be messy and to have some grace.
I tell people that all the time because I don't know if you probably don't know this, but I do Enneagram consults for the FFP, for the clients inside of it. And that's one of the bigger things that I talk about, especially when we're talking about just like the ugly traits, I'm like, I always preempt it with, these are the unhealthy traits that you may have experienced in your past, or it might be something that's going on now. Who knows? And I always just like preempt it or just pepper in, like, just give yourself grace because we all have these horrible traits. It's just a matter because, again,
Mm-hmm.
you're responsible for them. And you could beat yourself up about it. But yeah, I like that. That's so important.
Yeah, because what is the saying? Po buddy's nerfect. I think is po buddy's nerfect. Meaning like
Wait,
even
what?
that. It's like it's better if it's like written out, but it's like po buddy's nerfect, meaning it's nobody's perfect, but you say it wrong.
Oh,
Okay.
cute.
I saw a T-shirt once, and I was like, oh, I like that. But it is, and it's like, and the more grace you give yourself, the easier it is to give to other people. Just like it's like you can't love someone if you don't first show that love to yourself. It's that
Oh,
capacity of
yeah.
like, I can give to you what I'm willing to give to me. And if you're hard on yourself and you beat yourself up, you're probably going to be really hard on other people too, and just continue.
Yeah. Oops.
And then the next thing I talk to people about, the next key is perspective. And I love using the analogy of washing a car. And it's funny because I got this analogy from a situation with my boyfriend because he's an 8. No. And he'll often like, we'll be doing something and he's like, that's not the right way to do it. And in my mind, I'm like, what do you mean the right way? Like, there's lots of ways to do it. And I think that's the thing about perspective. If we were washing a car together, the right way for you and the right way for me might look very different based on what we value. And maybe you value doing it really efficiently. And so the right way is like, we're going to soap up this side, rinse this side, soap up this side, rinse this side. And it's, kind of like laid out super efficient. But if the right way for me is, to have fun, and I'm like, we should have a water fight and we should do, all this other stuff, both of us may feel that we know the right way to do it, but in reality, it's just the way based on like what we value more. And so it's like holding space for that just because something is really like valid for you, it may not be for the other person. And I think it's important, especially in conflict. I always talk about zooming in and zooming out. So when you zoom out, you're looking at it like, okay, how are my values like really influencing the way I want this to go? And how could I, again, hold space for somebody else's way of doing things? And then I talk to people about zooming in. And I think it's Alec Hermosi that says it's like hard to hate up close. So when when you get really curious about like, well, why do you feel that way? And you start asking questions, that helps open up your perspective too.
That just like hits home for me so hard. Because growing up, and I've been, I'm 30, I just turned 33, and
Me
been through a
too.
few relationships. Oh, nice.
Good
So we've
number.
been through a couple relationships, right? So
It's a couple.
So the biggest theme I always saw, regardless of which relationship I was in, would be like, I always use loading the dishwasher as that kind of example, because that was an actual fight I would still have with people, where it's like, no, you got to do it this way, you got to do it that way, blah blah blah, and I'm just like, they're gonna get clean. Like, if the thing is gonna melt if I put it on the bottom thing, that's fine. I'll move it. You know what I mean? Like, but the way I thought would be like, the end result, it needs to get clean, put it in there, let's go, like, let's go. It doesn't need to like be perfect. Let me put my cat down. It doesn't need to be like Tetris perfectly in the dishwasher. And so I would explain, I'm just like, I understand that's how you feel it should be done, but they're still getting clean. And they're like, no, they would just dig their heels in. It was so stressful. I'm just like, it's fine though. Like, we're both like, not yelling at each other, but just like, I'm digging my heels in, they're digging their heels in, and it's like, this is going nowhere.
Have you seen that meme where it's like there's always two people in a relationship, one who loads the dishwasher like a Scandinavian architect and the other who loads it like a raccoon on meth? And I was like,
That's me.
Same. I saw that and my boyfriend's like, you're the raccoon. I was like, I know.
See, it's just, and I also come from the mindset of like, the whole saying of like, choose your battles or whatever. I'm like, this is not what I'm gonna like choose to put my energy on, of how to like load the dishwasher properly. Like, I got bigger fish to fry. But then comes like, what was I gonna say? like as much as I would want to respect, the other person's way of doing things, and I would try to get curious and I would ask questions, and that's helped me so much in my relationships, was asking questions. But then I also, there was still another layer that I needed to shed, because when I would ask those questions, it came off as like argumentative. And I'm like, I cannot win. I just want to understand. They're like, why are you pushing back? Why are you always arguing with me? I'm like, I'm not. I just want to understand.
And
But
that, I do think that is somewhat, I mean, anyone can have these characteristics, but I think it's somewhat of an 8 characteristic, because I run into that on the flip side, where I'll be like, why are you like interrogating me or making this a debate? And it's like, I'm not, but it is. It's like people seek to understand in different ways. And that's, again, it's
yeah.
like another great tool for getting to know your partner, to be like, oh, that's what they wanted. Kind of like a lot of men and women struggle with, women tend to build intimacy and conversation by sharing things with each other and sharing things with their partner. And men, it's more about solving things. And so while like mansplaining is definitely a real thing,
Yeah.
sometimes I think in relationships, like we take it as offense to something, like he's talking down to me, when in reality, he might just be trying to build some intimacy because he's trying to solve something for you. And it's just a different way of kind of thinking, kind of like maybe they're not interrogating you and being like asking questions to make you defend themselves. Maybe they're asking questions because they truly want to understand you so that you can move forward. And again, that's where that grace piece comes in, and like having like the charitable outlook towards your partner, because, with a stranger, it's different. But if you're in a relationship with someone and you truly, like I said, believe that deep down they're a good-willed person, then it's easier to hold that space.
Yeah, that's true. I've had to, with my partner now, he's the one, like, for real. He's also a 7, actually. This might as well just be an Enneagram talk.
I know.
Like,
See, 7s and 8s.
but I know they are, but he's so well grounded, and I don't know, his mom raised him so well. But one of the things that I've learned in my communication, because like the Enneagram again helped me learn how I come across to other people. So like I know I'm naturally going to be intense, and people might be like, okay, get away from me. Or I might feel demeaning, or I'm talking down to them or whatever. So I've had to tell, when we were first together, like, the ways I sometimes naturally communicate unintentionally, I might sound really emasculating to you if I'm really passionate about a subject, or maybe we're in conflict over something, and I value that I do communicate very well, and I don't fight. I'm not a fighter. I'm a talker. So I've had to tell that to him, like, if you ever feel that I'm just being emasculating to you or talking down to you, you have to tell me, because I don't know that I'm doing it, and it's never, ever by intention, because I don't want to feel that way. I don't want to make anybody ever feel that way, regardless of who you are. So that's one of the things that the Enneagram taught me.
Everyone, go look up your Enneagram. Well, not look up, but go find someone, or
Yes, do the test.
Get a call.
Yeah.
Do a test, get a call, read a book. No, that's so good, because I had a client who he was a 9 and his wife was a 2. And when I first started working with him, there was a lot of things that would come up about just like the way they communicated. And I, got them to do the Enneagram and everything. And he was like, oh, like I want to keep the peace. That's why I withdraw. Like he's not trying to be like rude and be like, I'm not having this conversation. He's just trying to maintain the status quo and keep everything, calm and put down. So it's like, again, having those insights about yourself, like, hey, I might be intense, but it's, this is not my intention. I'm not trying to put you down.
Yeah.
It's just my personality coming out.
It's very powerful to know those things about yourself. That's why I'm obsessed with it. Was that 7? I wasn't keeping count.
One more.
Okay.
And the last one is be a great listener, or just listening. And I think it's the part of communication that people like to learn last, because if I talked about it first, most people would quit listening, because it involves being quiet, right? And I mean, I'm a 7. I don't want to be quiet most of the time. I like to talk. But it's so important, because not only like your behavior as a listener, your partner will probably start to mirror back a little bit. But I think a lot of people get stuck in this, like they start to listen, especially during conflict, and they're building this like response in their head. Like, here's my comeback. As soon as you quit talking, like, I'm going to let you have it.
Pow.
Exactly. And I'm like, no, listen to understand. And, summarize what they said and then ask for clarity. Be like, is this what you meant? Like, give them space. And I even tell people, I'm like, count to 7 after they quit talking. Because 1, they might not be done. Sometimes I do that sometimes. Sometimes I have long pauses when I'm trying to share something that upset me. And 2, it gives you a chance to, like, again, check your energy and check your emotions and be like, okay, have I just been sitting here so I get my chance to talk, kind of like a courtroom kind of debate, or am I actually hearing where my partner is coming from? And again, it's like the better listener you are, couples, we tend to mirror each other a little bit. So if you're giving that space and you're being respectful and you're not interrupting your partner, it's more likely that they're going to notice that and they're going to give you the space and not interrupt you.
Yeah, that's one of the harder traits to get, because you naturally want to protect yourself. And yeah, I've had to learn to just like pause and be respectful, and like, it's a tough thing to navigate, but it is very powerful. And yeah, so with this like communication subject, what do you have like some examples of important but maybe uncomfortable conversations you think every couple should have?
Yeah. Especially couples, like if you're entering into a long-term relationship, like a couple of things off the bat that I think everyone should be talking about is, 1, like, what are the rules of the game? Like, what's the outline of the relationship? I mean, is it a monogamous relationship? Is it not a monogamous relationship?
The conversation.
The conversation.
Yeah.
And I know people be like, well, when can I have that conversation? And yes, I do think there's a point where some people jump into things too quickly, where it's like, if it's the first date and you're like, want to be my boyfriend, want to be my girlfriend, that might feel too soon. But honestly, I think you should have those conversations when you feel that pull to have them, because that's going to be truest for you. And you want your partner to know like the real you. You don't want to like, oh, I'll just keep some of these things to myself. I'm not going to tell them that I want to have kids until, a couple of months, just in case they don't want to. I'm all about like, get the big things out in the open.
Yeah.
And kids is another one. Like, that I think I looked it up again to see if it had changed order, like the reasons people typically get divorced. And it's money, sex, and kids are typically the big 3.
Yeah.
And that's another conversation people have a hard time talking about, is like sex. Like, be open and honest. Like, what do you like? What do you not like? Are you satisfied with like how this is going in your relationship? And money is a big one too. When you're entering into a long-term relationship, if you're going to start, and I think especially if you're going to get married, like, please talk about money before you do.
Yeah. Yep. Those are like, I was thinking about when I was going to ask that question, I was like, I wonder what that'd be, but you say it, I was like, oh my God, duh. Like, but with what you said earlier about, if any conversation is important, if you feel like it's important, because one of the things that I learned over the years was that if something was on my heart, I would, one, write it down if I had to, if it was too much. And I would just basically just ask the universe, I'm like, okay, I really need to have this conversation with him, but I need to know when the right time is. And it would always happen. It would always happen. Even if it wasn't that night or the next day or whatever, I just like put a pin in it in a good way. Right. And it would just naturally get there, because I may have led the conversation, or I may have had the courage at that time and I didn't have it before. So I think that is like really important. One thing for people to like, you don't have to like hash it out right now. It's okay to find the time and place for everything, right?
And be courteous of the other person, because just because you're ready to sit down and talk about sex or finances doesn't mean they are. And so just a good rule of thumb is to be like, hey, I really want to have a conversation about this. Would you let me know when a good time to talk about this is? Because this is on my heart, and like, I need us to talk about this, but I know I don't want to spring it on you. Because, while some people may be a little more open to that spontaneous conversation, some people, like, that's really going to rock them. And they're like, I need a second to like think about this or collect my thoughts on this topic.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely like giving like your partner space. And it's kind of that golden rule of like, you know, treat others how you would want to be treated. But it's, think about if you were on the flip side and your partner came to you and all of a sudden was like, we need to talk about this. And you were expected to jump into a deep conversation right in the moment. You'd be like, I feel very, you know, too vulnerable right now. I need a second to think. And
yeah, those were my tactics early on. It's like, we're doing this now. Let's go.
We're going to power through it.
Because that was my dad. Oh, I love my dad. But yeah, he loved to have a good debate. And it was so stressful. This is not about me right now, but yes.
But well, that's the things you've been saying though, and like talking about, well, you know, my dad, I saw this in their relationship. Like that's the first step in being someone who's like a great communicator in a relationship, is digging into like, why am I the way I am? Yeah. Because you learned how to go into conflict and how to get your needs met and talk to other people from the people that raised you. And so if you know, grew up with people that were constantly yelling and fighting when conflict happened, you might grow up and start yelling and fighting, or go the complete opposite direction and be like, conflict is scary, conflict is bad. And that's what I did for a long time. I was like, I'm just going to avoid it altogether. If I fight in a relationship, it means I did something wrong. It's a bad relationship. When it's like, conflict's not a bad thing. Like disagreements, like they happen. You're going to disagree with anyone you're close to for long enough.
Yeah.
Because you're two different people. But it's like digging into that blueprint and like, why am I the way I am? And then understanding that, that's when you can change, when you really get down to the, oh, I see now where, you know, maybe this characteristic of my dad is really coming out in me. And maybe I don't like that and I want to change that pattern.
Mm-hmm. I think everybody should have that curiosity about themselves. It just blows my mind when people just don't care. Aren't you just curious? Like, we're not trying to, you know, get you to join some cult. Like, aren't you just curious?
I mean, if you want to join the cult, that's, you know, we're taking applications.
The Enneagram cult. That's funny.
No, but I'm the same way. I have a hard time with that too. It's like, I don't understand why we wouldn't want to be better. And I've been told by my boyfriend, he's like, you're an idealist. Like you have this ideal way. He's like, I'm a realist in life. And I'm like, maybe you are. That I do find myself, I'm like, I don't understand why people wouldn't want to, you know, pursue growth and feel better and, you know.
Yeah. I get that. So as a coach, what are some, I'm just kind of curious. This is my morbid curiosity. Cause you know, like with nurses, you meet a nurse, you're like, what's the grossest thing that you've like, you know, those crazy hospital stories. So for you, I'm kind of curious, like, what are some of the common things that people come to you with and how you like coach around that?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of the most common thing. For me, because I really focus on and kind of market to helping people talk to their partners and communicate more, the most common thing I see is that people are just, they make assumptions and they don't ask questions. And curiosity, I love that word. I use it a lot. They don't have that anymore. They assume they know what their partner thinks. They assume they know what their partner feels. And so they quit talking. And so when they come to me, they'll have, you know, well, this is happening and this is happening. And when I start to kind of break it down with them, I'm like, okay, it's kind of like the, you know, asking questions. Where's the evidence? Like, where? And it's like, well, I think this is what, and it's like, they quit asking. So it's like this mess of assumptions is really like the universal thing I see most people come in with when they're struggling in their relationship. It's like, they don't ask questions anymore. And they're not curious and they're not open to the fact that like their partner might have changed and grown since they got in a relationship with them. And it's not the same person. And that's always hard for people, especially in long-term relationships. Like, well, it's not the same person I met 5-10 years ago. I'm like, well, are you the same person?
Yeah.
I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago. And it's, you know, being able to hold the space for that change. But it really is just that. It's like a lot of misunderstanding happens because they're just making so many assumptions about who they've created their partner to be.
Wow, that's an incredible way to put it. Assumptions is just so chef's kiss. I do want to ask because Are you part of the Nashville Facebook groups on Facebook? Sorry, this kind of left field. Well, there's a
Yeah,
couple, they have like 30, 40,000 girls, the big ones where it's just the open Nashville girls groups for
I don't,
Nashville.
I'm not.
It's okay. It's okay. Because this is why this next question, why I thought of it, because I see so many posts of, oh, the dating scene in Nashville is just trash. Men are trash. I go on so many bad days. And then there's these TikTok accounts where it's all about documenting their horrible dates. So I want to like talk to the single people right now, whether they're men or women. Like, what are some red and green? We want to talk about green flags too, but green and red flags that people can be aware of if they're on their first date or the first couple of dates. What can they look out for?
Yeah. I think it starts even before the date because
Ooh,
when people kind of put out those complaints, like there's no good men left in the world, I'm like, have you met all of them?
I know. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely disagree with that. I'm like, I know a lot of great men. Like I'm dating one. I have friends that are, I have brothers that are. I'm like, I know a lot of great men. I know a lot of great women when guys are like, there's no good girls in the world. And I'm like, there are great women in the world.
Yeah.
My question is like, what are you looking for and what are you really attracting because of like what's going on inside of you? So I'm like, before you even go on the date, it's like dealing with our own stuff is important. But when it comes to being on the date, notice how you feel, like physically in your body. Notice like when you're sitting across from that person, are like, it's again that fight or flight kind of response. It's like, do you feel grounded? Do you feel at peace? Because your body is going to like signal to you before it really comes up to your mind. And a lot of times I think we feel butterflies, and in reality your nervous system's kind of going, hey, I don't really feel very grounded and good around this person, right? But we don't listen to that because I know for me, I used to do this a lot. I start to like spin this fantasy of like the potential of the person I'm with,
Yes. Yes.
and what
So
this
true.
person could be and what could happen and for me personally, I've never been blindsided. I've always just ignored the red flags. Like if I go back and look, I'm like,
that's me.
I was blindsided. I'm like, no, I wasn't. I was just like, oh, I don't see them. I thought they were balloons,
Yeah.
But I would say the biggest thing again is just noticing like, how do you physically feel around that person? And how comfortable do you feel to, express what you're looking for? And I think that's why a lot of people run into trouble is they're not open and honest about what they're looking for, or they don't really know what they're looking for. Like, what's your intention? Are you looking to get laid? Are you looking to have a relationship? Maybe both. Like what do you want to get out of this?
Yeah.
And because if you again have worked on yourself and you're secure in who you are, the guy or the girl who is flighty and wants to use you is not going to be that attractive to you because you're going to be like, oh, I don't even feel good around this person.
Mm-hmm. That's such a good point. And that's what I tell people too is, why don't you just start with yourself? But nobody wants to do that. Like, cause that's, it just brings up all the points that we've already talked about. Is you have to be vulnerable. You have to be, accept reality and get to know yourself and all this stuff. But again, it's just like, I got curious I feel like I'm only talking about myself. I'm sorry, but it's just us. But, because I got curious at like why I was only attracting a certain type of guy. It was always like the complicated introvert. And that's the one I married, and all the people I dated after that were like that in some form or fashion. And I was like, why does this keep happening to me? And then, yeah. And during that time, I went through the whole growth and vulnerability process in my last relationship. And I've told this story before, but my last relationship, when that right before that ended, um, I knew it was about to end. My intuition was like, this is happening soon, so let's prep. And I was like, I am staying single. I have to, because it was always one right after the other. So I told myself, minimum of 1 year, you stay single. Like that's what you need right now. And I just continued to grow. And then I really got to know who I really wanted in my life. And it was the opposite. It was the type 7, the happy go lucky, funny dude. And that's exactly what God gave me. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is such a great point of just getting curious about yourself and what you really want. And that takes time. I think people, again, need to give themselves grace about like, it's okay that you don't know these things and you don't have to be in a relationship just to be in one.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of women are kind of guilty of that, just ignoring things.
Well, or we'll see something in other people and we're like I did this for a while. I was like, I just attract emotionally unavailable men. And the truth was I was emotionally unavailable. So I was just
Oh.
attracting what I was. Like I was the one that was like, and I had a friend kind of call me out on that. They're like, because I had a relationship and I was like, it was a great relationship. We got along great and all these things. They're like, did you? Like you did, but like, was there any depth to it or was there any, and I was like, oh no, because it was very safe for me. Because at that time I was so scared of like getting hurt again that I was so
Yeah.
closed off that I was like, of course I attracted someone that was kind of at the same level that I was at. And that's why I say it's like when you really pursue your growth, like the people that that you don't want to attract, that you're not really into, like they won't even be attractive to you anymore because you're
Oh,
like,
yeah.
oh, I'm not looking for the player anymore. Like I know I'm not looking for that anymore. And so again, but it's it's the part of work people don't want to do, but it's like you got to get really like up close and personal with yourself and be like where are the parts of me that I need to work on?
Where do you suggest people start with that when it comes to their, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm curious about myself. It's kind of like going to that first AA meeting. Like, well, what would you suggest people do if they're starting out on this journey and it's uncomfortable and they just need to dip their toes in at first? What would you recommend?
I mean, not to like kick a dead horse, the Enneagram is a great tool to start with because it's kind of a fun tool to start with. So honestly,
Yeah.
I think tools like that are great. Um, I think it can also be helpful to make a list and just write down the things that you really value and write down the things that are really important to you or characteristics you see in people that you're like, I really like that's important to me. And then kind of do an audit of yourself with it. Like look through it and be like, where do I have these? And maybe you write down the characteristics of, the guy I really, really want or the girl I really, really want. And then go through and be like, oh, like maybe that person has high integrity. And like, do I have high integrity? Like, do I keep my word? Do I lie to my friends? Do I gossip behind their backs? Like, where do I kind of match up to these characteristics that I want someone else to have? Because a lot of times we want someone else to like, be this Hercules, this perfect person or
Yeah.
whatever. And it's like, oh, but like, I'm not very honest if I'm being honest with myself, or I'm not very kind, or so whatever it is. So I find that useful, just kind of like getting an idea of just like, what am I looking for? And then from there, it's like, maybe I just pick one area to work on. It's kind of like if you're cutting out bad food, maybe instead of going cold turkey on everything, you just quit drinking soda for a week.
Yeah.
It's like, maybe if it's like, well, I want to build up my integrity, that's something that matters to me. It's like, I'm going to really work on not gossiping about my friends anymore. And for the next month, that's my focus. Like, I'm not going to gossip and I'm going to like remind myself of that. And it's like slowly just building your character up. But honestly, though, I really do think the Enneagram is a great place to start because especially when you dive into it, you can kind of see those levels of health and kind of find where you are. And then it also, again, it shows you like, oh, here's where I go in growth and here's where
Yeah.
I'm going in stress. You can really kind of gauge where you are. And then that gives a nice, I think, kind of map on where you can go to.
Yeah, I always recommend the Enneagram too. And some people are like, I'm not doing, like my ex, when I first discovered it, he was like, no, I don't want to be put in a box. I'm like, you don't get it.
I always say to people, I'm like, no, we're going to put you in a box and then show you how to get out so you can exhibit all great types of online numbers. But, and yeah, I think it's funny too, because I've gotten that response. And I actually had an ex too that I got really excited about the Enneagram with, and they were like a hard no to it, which was also kind of a sign to me that maybe this isn't someone that I'm really that compatible with long term, because I love personality frameworks and I love
Yes.
to, so I'm like, maybe that wasn't, and it wasn't the relationship for me, but that's funny.
I always recommend to you, and I've talked about this on the podcast so much already, books. But a lot of people aren't big readers, which is okay, but you'll get there. I know when I first met Casey, I was really in my personal growth book phase. It lasted a couple of years, and I even had a book club that was on that subject. And I'd read like 24 books a year on this, personal growth stuff. And when I first met Casey, I'm like, you should read this book. I don't read books. I don't read. I'm like, okay, well, look who reads now.
Now you're a reader. I'm a big audiobook person personally, because I can, do it at the gym. I can do it when I walk the dogs in the car. If I'm working on something that's a little more mindless and less I don't have to be as focused on. But no, I agree. I'm very much into books as well.
Yeah. And podcasts, like not only the one that I mentioned. Do you listen to Dr. John Deloney's show?
I don't.
Do you know who he is?
I don't. But sounds like I should.
Yeah, he actually just wrote this book. I haven't read it yet. It's called The Non-Anxious Life.
Okay.
And his podcast, he's associated with Dave Ramsey. I think he's an associate of him. And sometimes he's on the Dave Ramsey show. But his podcast, he has people call in with their problems or issues, anything, and he just does like several minutes, 10, 15 minutes of just talking them through this thing. And his dad was some FBI investigator person who talked people off of ledges or stuff like that. It is so interesting hearing.
I'll have to look that up.
I binge it all day long. Luckily, it's been around for a while, so I have so much that I can just listen to all day long. So it's just so cool.
That's feeling?
It is.
But I found was it the Modern Wisdom podcast? I've been binging, and I realized they have like 700 episodes, and I've listened to like 10. And I was like, I have so much runway in front of me.
Yeah, it's so great.
The Mel Robbins podcast and Mel Robbins books in general, I think are also a really good place to start if you're new to personal development. I just think she's very real, and the way she lays things out, it's very it's just tangible.
I wouldn't be surprised if she was an 8 for one. I have not listened to her. Yeah, I haven't listened to her podcast, but I did read her book a while ago. It was the 5-second one.
Yeah, 5-second rule. And then she did the high five habit, which was a really good one.
So basic, like the 5-second rule was just. It's easy. I'm not going to get up at 5 a.m. though. I'm not going to count down at 5 a.m. and get up. I'm getting.
Yeah, it's hard to the 5 a.m.
The sleeping part. I'm not there yet.
I go to bed early enough. I'm not going to remember the author right now, but one of my all-time favorite books in kind of relationship world is Your Brain on Love. It's really good because it goes into a little bit of attachment theory, just, being in a relationship, getting healthy to be in a relationship. So Your Brain on Love is a great place to start.
That sounds amazing. I've never heard of that. And I've been wanting to learn what my attachment style is. I'm just curious, especially since I'm such a good person nowadays. I was just kidding. I'm not now.
I think attachment theory is so helpful. I just think it's important for people to not label themselves with that because it's a continuum. And so most people are closer to secure attachment than they might think sometimes when they read about it. And also who you're in a relationship can kind of influence. If you're a little bit more anxious and you get into a relationship with a super avoidant person, you're probably going to look more anxious than you would, are on your own. But it's really helpful. It's just keeping that lens of it can change. Even if you take a quiz or read the book and you're like, I'm super avoidant. It's well, you don't have to stay super avoidant. You can work towards, secure attachment.
Yeah. I love that. I'll get into that. It's one of those things where I'm I know that's a rabbit hole if I get into it, so I'll do it when I'm ready. All right. So, what are some, if any, final thoughts that you want to leave the people with?
Man, final thoughts.
What the thing that you just want to spread to the world? Like, if it be your last breath on earth, what are you telling us?
I would say that we're pack animals, and I really believe we're wired for connection. And I think sometimes people beat them up over, I shouldn't need anyone. And I think we're designed to need people. We're designed to live in, community with people. And if you're in a place where you're like craving that connection with someone, like that's a very human thing to crave. And whether you find that, in a platonic relationship, a romantic relationship, I would just encourage you to like seek out other people in your life. Like the world today, I feel like we've gotten, especially, since the pandemic, it's like more and more isolated a lot of the times. We have abilities like this to be so connected with people, but sometimes the depth of that connection is missing. And I really believe that humans, like we need those, people that we can get vulnerable with and real with and connected with. And so, yeah, like reach out to other people.
Amen. Oh, that's so sweet. You're really going to, after that, you're really going to love Dr. John Deloney because that's his big thing. It's about connection and community with people. And a lot of the things that he recommends to people at the end of their little call is like, do you have a group of girlfriends that you can be absolutely 100% yourself with and tell everything to, that small, tight, even if it's just one or two? That's his big thing. Because it's true. You're so right. But yeah, thank you so much for like coming on. Where can people find you? We need to know that.
Yeah, the best place is probably my website, I guess, because it links to everything else. It's just lillyrachels.com. And I'm at Lilly Rachels on most social platforms. And yeah.
Okay.
lillyrachels.com.
Well, gotta have you on again for an actual Enneagram episode.
That would be so fun. We can just talk about it. And I want to learn more because
me too.
Selfishly, I know the numbers I know most about are like my number because
of course
who doesn't want to read about themselves. And then of course the people closest to me, but there are certain numbers where I'm like, I don't have a lot of like 4s in my life. I realized the other day, I'm like, I need to learn more about the Enneagram 4.
Yeah. We'll do something. And when I meet you in person officially, we'll talk about it.
I know, since you're right down the road now.
Wait, I'm going to hang up the call and I'm going to ask you where you live. So, because I don't want to do that live.
Here's my address.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again, everybody. Thanks for listening, and y'all have a great rest of the day. Bye. Thanks for listening to the FFP Alignment Podcast. Please support us by downloading, rating, and recommending us to your friends and family. Be sure to check us out on Instagram at the FitFemme Project. That's FITFEMME Project. And for those of you looking to find their essential balance of lifestyle and fitness, book a free consult by going to thefitfemmeproject.com. That's FITFEMME Project.com and click Apply Now. Until next time, this is the FitFemme Project Alignment Podcast.